What if I were to suggest that you play a key role in the awakening world? And that you are watching this because you have heard the call. We can start right now by opening our hearts and minds. Welcome to the awakening world.
Good evening, everybody. I am Love Coach Scott Katamas, and welcome to the Awakening World. I see a lot of our friends are with us tonight. And so for those of you that come on a regular basis, you know what to do. Let us know where you're from geographically. I recognize all of it, but for all of our guests, it's cool for them to see. And I also want to welcome everybody who's watching on over 100 Facebook groups and pages. A big thank you to John and Summer Raymer and the Sign Network for getting us out to so many people. And a big special welcome to everybody watching on Unify. And again, if you're on one of the Facebook groups or one of the YouTube channels, let us know where you are geographically. It's really fun with Unify because we get people from all over the world. And I want to invite you to actually come on in to our Zoom room. We're going to have a very dynamic conversation tonight. This whole weekend is dedicated to really learning to listen to our soul, listen to our divine purpose. And Jennifer Hill, who you're going to meet in a moment, has done an amazing job of bringing in really very wise beings to share their thoughts, their inspirations, and we want to make it a dynamic conversation and include all of you listening and watching. So for those of you who are watching live, I want to invite you to come on into our Zoom room. It's easy and it's free. Just go to globalpeacetribe.com. That's globalpeacetribe.com and register. You'll see the little button that says register here. And if you put in the promo code new friend, you'll get all the links to all of our shows for the next 2 months. We do a show every Friday night, Saturday night, and Sunday morning. We pick a theme and we explore that topic throughout the weekend. And tonight it's all about really learning to listen to our inner self, listening and claiming our divine dharma, if you will. So come and join us. It's easier to connect. But I will also check to see what's going on in the chat boxes as best as I can on the other Facebook groups and pages. All right. You've already heard me sing her praises, but I want to turn the spotlight over to the wonderful Jennifer Hill, who I've gotten to co-host with 2 weeks in a row. You're becoming a regular here, Jennifer. I love that.
I'm so happy, Scott. How does it get better than this?
It doesn't. Life is really good. And for anybody who doesn't know who Jennifer is, she really is. She's an amazing person. I'm convinced that she doesn't sleep because she's always awake. She always responds to my text messages very quickly, and she knows just about everyone on the planet. I do understand there's a couple people up in Antarctica that you haven't met yet.
They're
But
friends, Scott. I just haven't brought them on the calls yet, but they are dear
oh,
friends. I'll
okay.
introduce you.
Jennifer is that kind of a person. She's really, truly an evolutionary leader. She's an entrepreneur, an author, a speaker. She's a television host. She's hosted popular shows with Deepak Chopra, Roland McCready, Dalen here, and everybody, including those people up in Antarctica. Um, Her significant current venture is that she co founded a wonderful organization called OmHeals.com. We've been doing some projects with Om Heals. They've been a big part of the awakening world, and some of your practitioners from Om Heals are with us tonight. So, Jennifer, thank you. Tell us a little bit about our theme for the weekend, and then please, I want you to introduce your guests.
Hmm. Thank you, Scott, and thank you to each of you out there. It is such a pleasure and an honor to get to be here and to be of service. One of my favorite prayers that I ask the universe every day is I say, please put me where you need me most. And it doesn't matter if it's Antarctica, online, wherever it might be, and whatever time of day it might be. I think that's half of the purpose is really just showing up for life. And I am so blessed to have recently co-founded a company called Om-Heals.com, where we have incredible practitioners, almost 80 now, I think, from around the world, every country except Antarctica, ironically, Scott, or every continent, I should say. And yes, we match people with energy medicine practitioners from around the world. It's free to get matched, so feel free to check that out. And we are lucky today to have two of our practitioners from the platform with us, as well as Dr. Krista Luminary with us. And so before I introduce you to everyone who's going to be joining us in our panel style fireside chat that we're going to be exploring tonight, I wanted to give you a context for how today's theme came to us. I like to pray and meditate, and one day when Scott asked me to graciously co-host with him today, I heard that what a lot of us are yearning for, what our souls really want, is we really want the ability to listen to our souls. What does that mean? What is our soul? I've had people even ask me, what does our soul sound like? What does God sound like? What does our higher purpose look like? And how do we embody our purpose? Many of us might have already spent years or decades or lifetimes working on our purpose. And so tonight is really our opening opportunity to play in the sandbox of consciousness with our souls. We have Goodman, who is a dear friend and a practitioner on the platform, who is going to be talking about how to clear our beliefs. He is an extraordinary human. I've had the privilege and honor of working with him, and I've referred him to many people both on and off the platform. And the work he does, he is the guy who trains the trainers. Last year, I was at a retreat with a dear friend, Dr. Steve Young, and he took me through this beautiful process of how to release something that is stuck in your body. And then a few months later, I'm introduced to Lion to interview him. And it was only then that I realized that Lion trains other doctors and trainers around the world. So Lion is an incredible trainer of some of the top trainers and doctors and coaches around the world, and is just a beautiful soul and human being. And so, Lion, I'm so grateful that you're here with us today, my friend.
Thank you, Jennifer. It's a delight, and thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, absolutely, my friend. And then Krista, Dr. Krista Luminare, who is Lion's wife, and tonight is actually the first opportunity I've had to meet Krista in person, though I've heard so much about her from Lion, and I cannot wait to share her wisdom tonight. We were talking before the show and talking about listening to our soul. And Krista is a pioneer in this. She is going to be talking tonight about how we even communicate from a parenting standpoint with the souls of our children from conception and then all the way through as we're evolving as adult human beings. How do we bring that wisdom of the soul, of embodying our power and our purpose to all of our relationships? Her luminary leadership approach focuses on personalizing self-actualization path for those who want to efficiently clear their histories and conditioning and embody their true nature. So, Dr. Krista Luminare, it's such a pleasure to have you with us here today.
Thank you, Jennifer. It's a joy to be here.
Yes, thank you, my friend. And Wendy is another new dear friend, Wendy Elwell, who is an incredible Kundalini teacher. She teaches yoga nidra. She is a Reiki master. She facilitates beautiful retreats around the world, is a communication expert, also specializes in past lives and inner child work. And I had the privilege and honor of another wonderful healer on the platform, in addition to Wendy, named Haley, who had connected us and just sung Wendy's praises and said, "Oh, Jen, I am tickled pink. I have one of my favorite healers in the whole wide world, Wendy, who I'm doing a session with." And so I immediately said, "Ooh, can I please have her info? I'd love to find out more about that." And thus we were connected, and I was honored and able to get to do a session with Wendy as well, who is just a beautiful soul inside and out. And I'm sure we'll get to feel your heart tonight, Wendy.
Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you for having me, and great to be here with all of you. Thank you, Scott.
My pleasure.
Thank you so much. So, Scott, I'm going to hand it back over to you before we go into the full panel. Any other thoughts, my friend?
Just want to acknowledge that we've got people from France, Sweden. Jennifer's coming to us from Portugal.
Yes.
We've got people from Australia, Canada, and of course all over the United States, from New York to California. So it's really fun that we have people from all over the world tuning in. And we do want to read your thoughts and your comments. So I'm not going to do too much talking. I'm going to be scanning what's coming in on our different Facebook groups and pages, our Zoom room. So give us your thoughts, your comments. And Jennifer, I'm going to turn it back over to you to ask the first question for our fireside chat. And as she asks, and as we ask questions, just want to ask each person to keep your comment to 2 to 3 minutes, and so that we can keep the ball rolling, keep things moving forward, and do our best for everybody to get equal time. So, Jennifer, what's the first question for the night?
Perfect. Thank you so much, Scott. And welcome to all the new people who have just joined us here. We're so grateful to have you here. And we invite you, tonight is about you. It is not about me. It's not about any of our guests who are here on the loving panel with us. It's about you getting your questions answered. So if you have burning questions, please feel free to ask them in the chat, and we'll address as many as we can throughout the duration of the night. And we can certainly connect you with each of our panelists after the program if you're interested. So the first question I have, Wendy, I'm going to turn it to you first, my friend. I would love to know your perspective on what role our soul has in multiple lifetimes. I know you're one of the experts on this program who specializes not only in this lifetime, but how that impacts us across multiple lifetimes and how that impacts our purpose. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Sure. Yeah, I'd be happy to. What I find a lot in past life regressions and some even future life progressions is that a soul comes to work on a lesson continuously until they feel like they've mastered it, and it shows up in different incarnations in different ways, of course, along with soul families reuniting and often remembering if someone just seems really familiar to you. And you don't know why. And it's easier sometimes to identify in people that you know well, but often you'll meet someone and it's just immediate, this immediate resonance and this understanding of connection that feels like you've done this before many times. And so all those are indicators that we've come back to work on this continuous issue or purpose. And what's really interesting is that a lot of people are coming together who have past lives from a particular time. There's like 1 or 2 incarnations that we choose to come back to work on. And it's showing up for a lot of people now in people who've had lives together in Rome and Italy. There's a lot of people having those same convergence of lifetimes in this incarnation that we're working out something together then. So there's a lot of ways that it shows up as a continuum.
I love that, Wendy. Thank you so much. If nobody, for context, I remember years ago, I had no idea what a past life was. And if you had told me this 10 years ago, I would have thought you were off your rocker. Although there's now great scientific evidence where people can actually go forward and prove that past lives exist. In fact, the first guy who introduced me to it was Damien Bertrand, who used to have a television show. And he would have researchers when he would do a past life who would go out and then actually validate things that there is no way that 20-year-old or 45-year-old Sue or Bobby in this life would know. And so if you've never learned about that, I highly recommend check out Wendy's work, or a great book on the subject that was my intro book to it is Brian Weiss's book, Many Lives, Many Masters. I laughed, I cried, and in 2 hours, I overcame my fear of death from reading that book. So I highly recommend it if you've never read it before. So thank you, Wendy. I love that. So Carissa, thank you so much. I would love to turn it over to you, my friend. I would love to know how you came to be the expert on, we were talking before the show, of even pioneering in this field of souls before we're even born. Can you tell us a little bit about how that's even possible?
Sure. Before we're even conceived in the notion of reincarnation. So when I was a budding counselor, fresh out of Ivy League college, and I became, I was under the support of a great practitioner, and within a year I was thinking, how come we're spending our young and later adult years healing ourselves from childhood trauma and abuse? There has to be a way to prepare for parenthood, excuse me, so that children can come in with more of a connection to their true nature. Excuse me, I'm in a hot room here. So I began to look through all the best of Western psychology, Eastern mysticism, and I, at the same time, had a spontaneous awakening in a sweat lodge of my own past life in the Holocaust, under the heat and under the conditions, and I began to study the notion of reincarnation, and spent 20 years trying to understand how to educate potential parents to really optimize the true nature of their child, the full potential of their child from the beginning of conception, and then with this notion of reincarnation before conception. So I wrote a book called Parenting Begins Before Conception. I had a doctoral dissertation on the subject. And it's really to, whenever a parent wakes up to this notion that the child is coming in as a soul with a tremendous amount of gifts, talents, and challenges from other lifetimes. And even if you don't believe in that particular notion, to inspire the parents to care for the child from the beginning of life, to support its true nature, its true purpose, independently from the parent's agenda. It was a very esoteric notion back then. True self was a very esoteric notion back then. Holistic perception of how to develop the physical, emotional, mental bodies, which is the personality each lifetime. And in that whole exploration, studying the best of the seven major mystic traditions, I realized the common thread was we actually come in for the purpose of evolving the soul. Whereas in my Harvard education, it was all about ego development. But the notion of the personality development is really, from a soul perspective, to be an instrument for the consciousness of the soul, which is made up of consciousness cultivated through many, many lifetimes. I agree with Wendy that we incarnate into families and different cultures to really understand and balance out particular activities that we've had in other lifetimes where we've misused power or rightly used power, and lots more to say about that.
We could spend 2 hours just on that topic, Carissa. I love it. This is one of my favorite topics to discuss with people. And for anybody out there who might be feeling a little daunted, I want to imagine kind of where you're at with this. People are thinking, oh my God, my soul, I'm struggling with what to have for breakfast or dinner tonight, let alone what happened, 5 lifetimes ago or several millennia ago. And so I'd say take it piecemeal. One of my favorite little techniques that I believe it was Michael Beckwith taught me a long time ago is just begin by praying every day. Talk to Source, Divine, Gaia, whatever energy resonates with you, and ask, what is my purpose? When you're in that quiet, peaceful time, see if you can hear what your purpose is, or talk to the universe. Why am I blocked? Right before we came on the show, I realized earlier today, I was doing a healing with someone, and I never realized it. It was completely out of my awareness, I guess I would say, that I had a fear of loss. And so I was praying about it and I could see this. And this is what's beautiful. The more you work with Carista, Lion, Wendy, or work with yourself or anyone on healing this, you begin to see this beautiful thread that ties in throughout your whole life. And instead of making it or the people in your life wrong, you get to play with it and inquire. And I just was like, universe, why am I having this experience of loss throughout my life? And clear as day, I heard there's a reason that you need to get to non-attachment. And it's part of your purpose in this life that's going to serve you later. So sometimes if we reflect, it can help us with really challenging things we might be going through in the moment. Right, Krista?
Yes, it's what's often called karma, repetitive patterns we come here to realize.
Beautiful. Well, speaking of repetitive patterns, that was a perfect segue. Well done, Krista. We're going to turn it over to your lovely husband, Lion Goodman. So, Lion, my friend, I mean, you do so much. And talking about repetitive patterns, you are the king. You are the subconscious detective expert on this. Talk to us a little bit about how our patterns develop in this life and why it is those might stop us from fulfilling our purpose.
Well, first of all, we're not just spiritual beings. We're also psychological beings. We're also physical beings, mental beings, emotional beings, energetic beings. So I take this approach to see who we are as multidimensional beings. We exist in many dimensions at once, and our experience is multidimensional, and our beliefs are multidimensional because they come from our experiences. So in my work of clearing beliefs, we take the approach of you have to clear it multidimensionally. It's in all parts of us at once. So that's my specialty is clearing the blocks that get in the way. And the source of this, of the blocks, is the fact that when we incarnate, we get immediate amnesia. That we come in, we are this incredible soul being, a soul in outside of our three dimensions. We come into these three dimensions in a little tiny body we have no control over, and there's immediate trauma. It's like, who am I? What am I? I forgot what my original intention was pretty much from the beginning. Some children are able to carry that knowledge and wisdom forward. Now, there's all kinds of names for those children, but most children get traumatized by the birth process, by their upbringing. They forget their original intention, and all of the psychological development that occurs and the traumas that occur create these blocks to the direct connection with the soul. So in order to connect with your soul, you need to clear the blocks that are in the way. It'd be nice to just pick up the phone and say, hello, soul, or hello, God, and hear on the other line, yes, what can I do for you? And some people have cultivated that. But what most people hear is because there's all this stuff in the way of that direct communication. So as you clear the blocks, clear the beliefs, clear the old stuff out of the way, that line gets clearer and clearer until you finally can simply ask your soul, what is mine to do today? And so I focus on the block clearing because that's what's in the way of remembering what our soul intention was, connecting directly to our soul, connecting to spirit, whatever you want to call it, higher beings, higher self, true self. And once the line is clear, once you clear out the psychological detritus, you have a direct connection that you can rely on, communicate with, two-way communication. It's not just one-way prayer, but two-way communication. Should I turn left or right? Turn left. Okay, great. So that's the connection to your soul, or what we refer to as the trusted source. Whatever that is for you. Might be Jesus, might be God, might be your soul. It's like that is something, someone you can rely on, and therefore get the information you need to live your life.
I so resonate with that line. And if I may diverge for a moment and just share a beautiful little Kabbalistic story that illustrates this point. I had been once told the story of a famous puzzle maker. And this puzzle maker made the most exquisite puzzles in the whole wide world. And all of the children of this village would be rapt with attention, just so giddy with delight, waiting for the puzzle maker to make his next beautiful puzzle. And so month after month, he would create these puzzles, and the children would all gather around, and the new puzzle would be revealed, and then the pieces would be strewn all over, and the children put it all together. And the sheer delight they experienced at this brought the puzzle maker joy. So one day he had an idea, and he said, I have it. The children love the puzzle so much, I am going to save them the trouble of putting the pieces of the puzzle together. So instead, I am going to give them the completed puzzle to start. So that way they don't even have to work for it. And so one day the puzzle maker, now all the children have gathered, there's 30, 40 children from around the village, and he unveils his puzzle, but there are no pieces. It's already completely intact. And the children were crushed. They were bereft. And they said, why would you give us a completed puzzle? And that is the story of us and our souls. We chose before we incarnated, as Lion just alluded to, and Carista and Wendy are mentioning, that we asked, please break apart the pieces. Give my soul the opportunity to gather back these little puzzle pieces, sparks of light, and to do the work to build the puzzle. Because if somebody gives you a completed puzzle, there's no fun in figuring it out. So that was just a beautiful little story about the puzzle maker that I had been once told in Kabbalah. So, Lion, I'd like to take it back to you for a moment and go into what are some of the tools. We're talking about our soul, and we're talking about how there's all these puzzle pieces. And you talked about clearing, the detritus that might be within our space. What are some recommendations? What are some tools that you recommend that we can get our hands on in order to be able to clear and have a more clear view of the world so we can see ourselves, the world, and our souls more clearly?
There's a lot of tools out there, and many of them work for some people some of the time, and a few of them work for most people most of the time. But there's no single tool that works for everyone all the time. So it's really a matter of experimentation for each individual. It's like try lots of tools and figure out which one works for you. I teach 15 different methods of clearing beliefs because everybody's different and they have different needs. And so clearing beliefs to me is the key leverage for this process, for this quest, because if you can find out what's in the way, what belief is in the way, for example, the belief, I don't know my purpose. So let's do an experiment with the audience. Close your eyes and feel what it feels like to hold the belief, I don't know my purpose. Whether you do or don't, just try it on like trying on an outfit of clothing. Just say to yourself and see what it feels like to believe it 100%, I don't know my purpose. And it's likely to not feel very good. So take that outfit off, set it to the side or throw it away. And now feel what it feels like to hold the belief, I know my purpose. And believe that 100% and see what that feels like. Jennifer, did you try that?
Oh, I did, Scott. It was terrible. Please don't ever make me do the first one again. It was awful. It was like this crushing sense of like, oh, the world is collapsing in on me, and versus this beautiful kind of expansive, I am everythingness.
Well, that's one of the techniques that I teach people is to try on beliefs to see what they feel like, because beliefs create feelings. You can feel it in your body. And when you try on lots of different beliefs, you are uncovering some of the magic stuff that's in the way, because we have, in my estimation, tens of thousands of beliefs about ourselves, about other people, and about the world. And so whatever is not working for you in your life likely has a belief somewhere down below in the psyche that is causing that to occur. Beliefs create our reality. Now, they don't create physical reality, that's already created. They don't create social reality because that involves you and I, but it can create your personal reality. And so you can, when you change your beliefs, you can change your experience. Changing your experience can clear the way for a direct connection to source. And once you have that connection, you're home free.
Yeah, so true, Lion. People ask me how I traveled around the world during COVID. My husband and I were very, very blessed that we were living in London and then somehow got into Paris, even though I was a US citizen and US citizens weren't allowed, and then found ourselves in Portugal. And honest to God, it's because I pray and meditate every day. I'd say, universe, where in the world do you want me to be today? And despite all the borders being closed around the world, the universe would say, go to Paris. And I'd say, well, universe, you see, I'm a US citizen and I can't get into Paris. And then next thing you know, the universe would be like, well, actually, you can go through the tunnel via car and they're accepting all citizens. So when we're connected to that, life just becomes in a flow. And to Scott's point earlier, you almost feel superhuman. You're like connected to the energy of everything. And then instead of meeting with resistance wherever you go, when you're in alignment with your soul's divine path and your purpose, you can just flow like a little feather in the wind and just go with wherever you're meant to be going instead of suffering and struggling. So I really love that. Scott, do you have some thoughts, my friend?
Yeah, I just want to give a little, we've got some comments coming in. So I've got a comment and then a question that came in from Facebook for our panel. Connie, who's one of our regulars, writes, our soul magnetizes certain behaviors from others in childhood in order to see the parts of ourselves that we don't love yet. We take on wounds in childhood, feeling victimized throughout our journey, but these become the sources of the mirrors that come to us to show us what's deep inside our subconscious, self-doubt, or feelings of less than. Mirrors come in the form of behaviors of others and the universe to show us these shadow pieces. So thank you, Connie, for that. And in a moment, maybe if any of our panelists want to comment on it. And then J.A. writing says thank you for being here. He's writing from the Facebook page on Unify. And he asks, how do we know if we are a new soul or an old soul? And what am I doing here? So there's some questions and comments for our panelists to respond to.
I saw Carista making faces for both questions, good faces, kind of like the eyebrow went up and like you could see the little light bulb going. So Carista, I'm going to turn it over to you for a moment.
Well, the second one, the second question, how do we know if we're a new soul or an old soul? It's secondary to me, and at the same time, I recognize what I would call an old soul, whether it's in a child or an adult, by the nature of their ability to really embody higher wisdom naturally through their egoic nature, their capacity to express love wisely, and to express their power in what I call right use of power, more in the bodhisattva harmlessness approach, that their relationship to kind of how they focus their mental powers, the wisdom nature, the heart powers, the love nature, and the activity, the power nature, is the advanced soul usually has more understanding how to wield those aspects of the consciousness. It's not always the case. There can be advanced souls that are quite reckless and are working through a lot of misuse of power and ignorance, imbalances from other lifetimes. So it's not a black or white answer in that regard. New souls have more of an innocence. But what matters to me most is that people understand that the ego presentation, the personality presentation at any age is only a small aspect of the self, and that we really have a greater nature available to guide us. And that one of the, I find, kind of glamorous illusions of the soul that is in some of the new age material is that the soul is always, a being of great light and great ability to only express good. And in my particular lineage of teachers that I trust, there are many advanced souls who also have a lot to be working out from many lifetimes of misusing their power and creating destruction. And that's a very humbling relationship to the soul. In the same way the ego has a shadow, the soul has a shadow. So those are different angles that I play with my understanding of, who's before me at any given moment, including myself.
I so love that, Carista. And I think it is important to realize that every part of this is like a piece of the puzzle. I love what Melinda said in the chat here in the Zoom room. My goal is to be the child who appreciates the puzzle presented, completed. So it's about allowing just all of it and to see that we are safe, we are known, and that all of these pieces, sometimes, it's only that 20/20 vision that we have looking backwards where we can see that excruciating, heart-wrenching pain. That's what propelled us forward into us being the human beings we are now, whether it's our divinely guided relationships, our jobs, or just finding fulfillment on a moment by moment basis. And Wendy, I would love to hear from you. I know past lives is, of course, one of your specialty areas. What are your thoughts on the soul and how it ties in to how we show up in this life. What have you noticed in the people that you've worked with?
I love what Karista said. So much of the using love, wisdom wisely. And when you can look at the mirror, the person that comes before you, what they're showing you, because the reason people show up usually in each other's experience is to help heal the wound. But without that awareness, the wound sometimes gets rubbed up against or exacerbated or triggered. When really, if we remember that the mirror before us is there before us to show us ourselves and for us to reveal to them in the divine nature of healing, the opportunity to see it reflected to us to heal it. And most often the wound or the patterning of the wounding becomes our greatest gift. So we can transform that into our offering, to the world based on what we've learned. So I love taking people, and you and I did this, the timeline healing, so that we can find those places and then give the person the opportunity to reframe it for themselves so that they can see how the pattern plays out. And sometimes if they can't identify, you just help them feel into the body. Where do you feel it in your body? Or what age were you when you could first remember it? And what happens for people is they'll find it, but they can keep going further back. They think, 20 something. And then if you say, okay, well, can you remember anything else? They'll kind of go back. And if that doesn't solve it, then usually it is a past life thing that the soul has carried with them. And then you just, access that. But I find it very helpful for someone to deal with their current incarnation timeline to clear it. And then if they still don't feel completely free, to look back in what may have shown up in other incarnations, as well as, the people you're interacting with in this incarnation, what they're showing you, like, where are you triggered? Where do you feel comfortable? And your solar plexus will generally give you a very good guide, kind of like what you were saying when Lion asked you, just feel into that, like right away, you can sense yes or no, so you have a really good gauge right there.
Beautiful. And Connie agrees and says, yes, Wendy. She totally agrees that when we feel triggered, it's our signal that we have inner work to do. And I'm going to actually take it a step further. One of the things that I think, whether we're talking about young souls or old souls, we're human beings at the end of the day. And one of the things that I think that we all struggle with, and somebody taught me this years ago, is sometimes the closer we are to somebody, if it's our spouse, our sister, our mother, father, best friend, whomever, we might have more triggers when we're with that person who's closer to us, and we even act younger. So instead of showing up as our 40 or 50 or 70 or a 35-year-old self, we show up as our 3-year-old self, having a tantrum sometimes in relationships. And a technique that I found can be very helpful and deeply healing for people around this, and I would love to hear everyone else's feedback on this, is if, number one, you're interacting with a spouse, a colleague, whomever, and you notice that they're getting agitated, or they're like kind of, they're doing this sort of a thing, see them as the age they're being. Instead of interacting with them as the 40-year-old or 60-year-old you see in front of you, imagine them as being a 4-year-old who's just really upset and had their lunch taken away. They just want a nap right now. And so I love to imagine when someone's that way, it gives us a greater capacity for compassion. Krista, I see you smiling over there. I'm going to turn it over to you.
Well, I'm a couples counselor of 40 plus years, and I'm an attachment specialist as well, and work with the consciousness, not just pre-birth, but how our early attachment styles with each of our primary attachment figures is playing out in our adult intimacy dynamics. And then on top of that, this notion that souls can come together embodied to work through past life dynamics as well. And I would say that the adaptive child that you're describing, some people call it the inner child, I call it the adaptive child, is this beautiful metaphor that you just gave to actually, in a sense, see they've been hijacked by these very primitive reactions. We all have been, we all do have that going on. Part of, I know in my particular practice, is not to indulge, once I'm aware I've been hijacked by a primitive part of myself, that it's really important to remember I have other parts of myself, my adult ego, as well as virtues that are available to actually offer my reactive self that puts some other part of me, the more mature and the more awakened part of me, in the driver's seat in any given moment. So when you saw me smiling, I was thinking about the last time, I had one of those hijacks. And the soul in the Vedic scriptures is described as being made up of virtues. So if we start helping the child reactive part realize, you don't get to be in control, you don't get to have your hands on the steering wheel of this self-expression right now, and there are other parts of the self to identify with and allow to come through, actually one can transform some of those reactive cycles, whether it's parent, child, employee, employer, or couples, in a way that's very swift.
Yes, I love that. And I find another thing to do too is just to notice, like you said, when we're going through that trigger, Krista, for me, I realize I check in with my inner child every morning as part of my meditation practice. And sometimes I'm a human being, and either one, it happens every now and again, I'll forget to check in with her. And then it is DEFCON 9. It'll be 2 o'clock and I will not have had lunch. And then all of a sudden, adult 41-year-old me is like, "Wah!" And then it dawns on me in that moment, and I go inside. I'm like, "Oh my God, sweetheart, is that you? Did I forget to check in?" And she's like, "You suck. You forgot about me." And then it's like, you got to kind of, "Hi, sweetheart. Is it okay? I'm so sorry." And then when we love ourselves, that takes all the pressure off of all of our external relationships. Instead of expecting our husband or friend or mother, father, sister, brother, whomever to fill that hole, we get to be the powerful ones. We get to go, "Oh, let me tend to that. Let me love you." And so I would love to hear a little bit more from you, Lion, on that. What are your recommendations? I remember you and I did some interesting parts reconciliation work too, that we, not just the inner child, but that we have these different parts that exist within us, right?
Yes, this is a way that we fragment, and my process is trauma-informed therapeutic coaching, because we need to understand trauma and what it does to us. One of my teachers just recently said, when you break contact with a baby, attention contact, break your eye contact, it's like being beaten to a baby. It's that painful. So all of us had traumas as children, and every time we have a trauma, a little bit of us breaks off and separates. And often it's because we can't handle the emotions that came up at the time, because they're bigger than we are. And so we have a part of ourselves separate off and deal with it differently. It may suppress the feeling. It may separate us through dissociation. It might, send it off to another part that becomes a big protector and jumps in when we're in danger. So the idea that we are made of myriad of parts and that we can bring these parts back together, it's collectively referred to as parts work. I teach voice dialogue, which is one form of it. That these parts of us are active all the time, or if they're not active, they're sleeping with one eye open, waiting for anything to come up that might trigger them. So if someone, if you were beaten as a kid, someone might do this with their hand, and the fact that the hand raises might trigger a protective child, a protector of the inner child, and suddenly that protector takes over and starts yelling and screaming to push away the violent person that's about to hit them. So all of our triggers are based on this psychological truth that we are of many parts, that parts of us can separate off, and that we can bring them back together through a process of dialogue. What you're doing with your inner child is beautiful, because you are dialoguing with that child, making sure she's okay. And I teach a process called rescuing the inner child, which is quite magical, where we can go back in time and actually change what happened to that child, so the child is no longer stuck in the trauma, but can be present and can come back to their playful golden self. So parts work is really important part of psychological healing. And we're not just one being, we're many beings, many parts of beings. We can have hundreds of parts or scores of parts that operate differently. For example, when you're driving a car, I'm sure you've had the experience of getting home after driving and realizing I don't even remember driving here. Well, that's because there was an inner driver who's very accomplished at driving a car that took over that function. And it's a perfectly good way of managing the mind, is giving different parts different jobs. So this healing, this coming back together in shamanism, it's called soul retrieval, because we leave these parts of us in other places, and we can bring them back together in a holistic way, so that, as you said, I'm taking care of all my parts. They're all well cared for. They're all reparented, and that those parts, those younger parts and the protective parts, can feel held like we should have been when we were children.
So powerful. I still vividly remember exactly where I was when we did our parts reconciliation work line. So thank you for all the work you do for everyone out there on this. I think it is such important work. As Don Miguel Ruiz says in the book Mastery of Love, he gives the analogy that it's like, as a human being, we're covered in third-degree burns all over our body. Imagine how painful that is. And then I start to get a little closer to Lion, or he gets too close to me. It's like, ow, ow, that hurt. And that's us as human beings going through life, because we have these wounds, we have these parts and pieces from this lifetime and prior lifetimes, that if we get too close, or somebody even gets near one of our wounds, we're just shocked and traumatized all over again by it. So I think that's such a beautiful point, Lion. Beautiful. So Wendy, I would love to hear a little bit more from you, because obviously you do a lot of work with the timeline and with the inner child. What are some of your favorite tools to do some work? Are there, obviously you do wonderful sessions, and we put Wendy's information in the chat. You can always go to om-heals.com to see if you match with Wendy or Lion or any of our other healers. Though I would love to have you share just some on-the-spot tools maybe that you might recommend, Wendy, for doing the inner child work or past life.
Sure. Yeah. It's funny you mentioned the matches too, because I matched with Lion, which I think is so fun that we're, I wanted to say, well, who do I match with? And I love the Om Heals forum, because like you say, there's so many tools. And so you can go on there and find out which ones are going to be most effective for you. For me, one of the ones that I find is universal to people is just simple 3-part breath work, because it will just unwind your central nervous system, and you can do it without, interrupting what you've got going on. So let's say it happens when you're in a business meeting or something, you just create a rhythm with your breath, the length of the inhale and exhale, and then you expand the capacity of it. Just simply by creating the rhythm, you can take more air in. So step 1 just naturally leads to step 2, and then you just take a little pause at the top of the inhalation and at the bottom of the exhalation, and your central nervous system starts to just unwind, so that you can kind of take yourself out of fight or flight or, freeze. It just, it's an easy way just to kind of calm yourself down in the moment if you're triggered, or if someone else is triggered. If you do that breath work, they'll start kind of aligning to you. They'll start to naturally kind of calm down according to your breath. So it's very helpful if someone else is triggered. The other very simple thing is, if you can identify the feeling that it is, like I'm scared or I'm stressed or whatever it is, and just take a moment and allow yourself to feel into, okay, what is the opposite of that? What's the polarity of that? And then just simply say, I am calm, or I am whatever the opposite of what you don't want to be experiencing. And it sounds somewhat oversimplified, but it works really well, because when we focus on what we don't want to be feeling, we're just exacerbating that. So if we just take a minute and sort of flip that coin and just feel into, okay, what is it I would prefer to be experiencing right now? Just a simple switch of that feeling can kind of help you just move through it in a way that is empowering, rather than being triggered by that emotion that you're not wanting in that moment. And then when you have more time, you can kind of trace it back, like you were mentioning with loss, like seeing the pattern of loss and doing some, deeper work around that, but just quick in the moment fixes, so that you can remove yourself from the trauma of it. Because like Lion was saying, you're just re-triggering that trauma. And now you may be acting, the first time that trauma hit. And if you don't clear it out, you could be anywhere from the multitude of layers that you never dealt with that same trauma response or trauma repetition. So any of those things are helpful to take you out of the traumatic response in the moment and then clear the trauma out, after the fact when you have a little more time to do so.
Yeah, it's such a great technique. In fact, I'm going to build upon that if you don't mind, Wendy. Something that I learned, there's two parts. Many of us in here, I think, are familiar with a lot of HeartMath's work. If you're not, please go check out heartmath.org, or you can always join the globalcoherencepulse.org, which actually is happening tomorrow at 12 p.m. PT. It's free to join. And a lot of that is focused on coherence, which HeartMath has proven that when we get into a coherent state, like Wendy was just referring to, that gives us access to our adult brain, to our executive functions, rather than amygdala running wild and going, I'm not going to survive this. And so a technique that I like to incorporate in addition to heart math is just focusing on breathing in and out through the center of the heart, a little slower and a little deeper than usual. And you can even add an emotion to that that's regenerative, such as calm or neutrality or peace. And something that I've recently tried amending and adding to that is actually to breathe in. It's called Tong Lin. Breathe in whatever it is you're feeling at the moment. I think sometimes in our culture, we think, oh, let me fix this. Let me put a Band-Aid on it. Feeling sad or angry or frustrated, that's not good. And I should not, right? I should not be feeling that way. And so then we try to suppress or repress or write off the emotion, as opposed to, wow, what am I feeling? Oh, maybe I'm feeling a little sad right now. What would happen if I breathed in the sadness, allowed myself to be with it, and then breathed out calm or breathed out neutral or some emotion to help you to get back to that state of coherence? So that's just a little technique that I like to use. If I notice I'm getting activated, breathe in whatever the emotion is, and half of it is identifying it, bringing that conscious awareness. Your soul is trying to say, hey, you might need to process something. And it's our opportunity to go, oh, wow, I wonder what that would look like. So Carissa, I would love to hear your thoughts. I have a feeling you have some things to share on this topic.
In terms of techniques to connect with the soul?
Yes.
Well, as there's so many, as everyone's alluding to, I go back to one of my original practices when I first discovered my soul, luckily way back in the early 80s. And I share with clients and do myself, which is to really, in a sense, induce the relaxed state, however one does that, through breath work, through meditation, quieting the mind, because the soul is often referred to in the perennial ancient wisdom texts as the sun. And if you think about the sun on a lake, the clear light of the soul, the clear light of consciousness of the soul, when the mind is filled with wind and rain and storm and the ego is caught in kind of, stormy emotions, that clear light can come through. So that's why people are often really inspired to meditate, is to quiet the mind. And then the light, the consciousness of the soul can come in. And when you feel that quiet mind, simply ask, I call forth my true self. I call forth myself in my full potential. However you want to invoke my higher self, the light of my soul, the pure presence of my being, whatever metaphor speaks to you, and be open to those impressions. As through the right brain, it would be more as light, as feeling. Some people really see, they have an image. Some people feel magnetically, like when I know I'm connected to my soul, I can feel it. It's just, it's just a unified feeling. I can feel my presence really backing my nervous system. And sometimes people hear the voice, they're guided through words. So there's 3 different primary languages: auditory, more visual, and a kinesthetic feeling sense. And then I invite people to really focus on the colors. The soul is more the essence consciousness. Virtues is another way. What I call the signature virtues, 3, 4, 5 virtues that you feel this true self in its unadulterated form really is made up of. And that can really connect with the part of the self that's greater than these ego parts that are reacting or in some kind of weather system that's really distracting. So that the soul has more of a expanded consciousness, even if it has past life aspects to it that are really filled with some of its own shadow nature. It also has this more divine quality to it. So ask for it to reveal itself and sense it. Energy, sound, feeling, words, virtues.
Okay, inquiring minds want to know, quick follow-up question, Kristen. I would love to get Lion and Wendy's feedback after this. Is how do we know it's the soul? Because that's the funny thing. That's the trickster. And I know I've struggled with this sometimes too, because you think you're hearing the soul,
Yep.
but what you're really hearing is maybe the ego on megaphone who's speaking over the soul. So how do you differentiate it? Because that's what I hear people are kind of asking in their minds.
It's a really important question called, how do we discern whether it's our projected ego, our higher self, it's often called the glamour aspect of the emotional body, or the illusionary aspect of the mind. In all the traditions that I studied, that is one of the great initiations of really discerning what's the ego, what's the soul. And I've come to realize that in my own practice over the decades, if I feel the guidance I'm getting is benevolent, it is useful, especially in the beginning days, I would try it out. Should I go to this party? I don't want to. The time you really realize it could be the soul is when the egoic nature, the desire nature, the feeling nature doesn't want to follow it. I don't want to go to this party. Go to this party. And then you go and you meet a very, important person that is a part of your purpose or a part of your karma that you have to work out. So those are the ones I trust the most, is when the guidance is opposing to what the I ego wants. But that sense of discernment is important, because at any given moment, it can be the glamour of the ego. And if it's harmless to follow it or do it, and you feel like, try it out and you'll see the results. And if it actually, puts you in danger or feels threatening in some way, even if it is your soul, your ego gets to have considerations, and it can be, you can honor the human part that doesn't want to follow it. But, if it's clearly something edgy that feels suspicious, just be conscious. And sometimes you don't know until you see the results and the outcomes of following it.
Yeah, I think that's great advice, Krista. And somebody taught me too, is to ask, is it in my highest and best good? Because sometimes we ask ourselves, should I or shouldn't I? And one thing I try to do personally as much as I can is say, is it in my highest and best good? And Lion, I feel like your soul is kind of reaching out, and remind me at the end, if everyone wants, I can talk to you about a little technique called soul talking, about how we can actually talk to other people's souls too, which is a fun concept. So Lion, your soul felt like it was saying it had something to share. So I'm going to you next. I don't know what it is, but I felt like you had something to share.
Well, I have direct experience with being tricked by my ego. I spent a year listening to what I believed was my soul, or what I called my trusted source. And it was speaking in kind of this pontificating way, kind of large generalities and, great wisdom. And I wasn't getting any real solid information. It was not telling me turn left or right. It was going, you may make a choice, that kind of thing. And after a year of frustration, I got this hint that it might have been part of my ego. And so I turned to it and I said, are you my ego? And I heard, yeah. And I went, what the fuck? Why? I wanted to talk to my soul. And it went, well, you said you wanted to talk to a higher being, so I made one up for you. And so I know for sure that the ego can trick you into having you believe that it is the soul. So there are certain standards, as other people have talked about here. You get direct information that is useful and proves itself to be true and good. So that's one way to know. And I think it is something that you have to keep testing and keep testing, because there are so many aspects of the self that good information could come from the ego. As Krista was saying, like the ego gets to have a vote, and there's all of our parts, and there's all these levels of higher beings. There's angels and archangels and the great ascended masters, and also the souls that are on their plane of existence. So you have to keep testing and keep digging and keep being curious to really know what you're following. It's like I tell people, Ouija boards are great for talking to dead people. The problem is that just because someone's dead doesn't mean they're smart. So it's really important to know who you're talking to, and you can have a dialogue and ask questions and find out who is this being that you're speaking to. So lots of people are channeling information. Is it valid? Is it not valid? Prove something to me. Prove that it's valid, and I'll listen to you. But there's a lot of garbage out there that people are transmitting from beings who maybe don't have our best interests in mind, or they just want to talk to somebody because they're lonely. So it's really important to just keep asking, keep testing, and find out what's right for you.
I'm going to jump in here for a quick second, just because I'm feeling, I'm loving what everybody's saying, and of course agree, but I want to put in a pitch for the ego. The ego is not bad. The ego is as essential to our human experience as having lungs, heart. It's part of the human experience. And higher doesn't necessarily mean better. It's just another way of living life. And as we've all said, we are multidimensional beings having these incredible experiences. And right now we're a multidimensional being that's focused on the human experience. It's pretty short. And that is very connected to the ego. And I often hear there's almost like a put down, like higher is better, ego is bad. And I'll close it by saying that I like to think of the ego as a faithful dog. And I'm a big dog lover, and the ego wants to protect the human self. Now, a well-trained dog doesn't bark at absolutely everybody. A well-trained dog loves most everybody and then is tuned in to where to actually be cautious. So let's all love our egos. Let's honor our egos and definitely learn when to let the ego lead. What I want for dinner, my ego gets to choose. And when to let other parts of ourselves lead on maybe some of the bigger aspects. So I had to put in a pitch for the ego there.
I love that, Scott, where the chat is blowing up right now. We have so many things. Before you started, George Noble said, all of our parts confer in what we refer to in an alchemical hypnotherapy as the conference room technique. And Susan says, true inner guidance loves us unconditionally and will respond to the question, are you my true inner guide who has the power to protect me? And I think that is important, Scott, because I think that one phrase that I learned years ago is, if you see a thing as good, it becomes good. If you see a thing as bad, it becomes bad. So what's the harm in looking for the good in everything? So whether it's our ego, whether it's a person in our lives or a system, knowing, all of these parts of us were meant and designed to serve us. When Wendy and I did timeline stuff, we could go back to when I think I was 4 years old and actually see how at that moment, that 4-year-old self needed some form of protection. And so, Wendy, did you want to chime in here and give any thoughts on your perspective on the soul and ego and their beautiful dance that they do with us?
I love that. It really is a dance, and there's definitely a time and a place for the ego. There's times when we really need it to stay safe. I think for me, I've always been really sensitive. So I will always ask for, show me the God, spirit, source, universe. What's the information? And then if I really listen to my body, it will tell me when something's off or not. And off doesn't necessarily mean bad, but really sensitive to feeling the energy in a room, feeling my own energy, and just, aligning to that. Because you know how we often say, well, I knew it, but I did it anyway, or I kind of had the feeling and I overrode it. If we really are tuned into that and in touch with that, we all have that wiring, because how many of us have said, well, I had the feeling and I didn't follow it, or I knew I shouldn't have, I kind of had the sense that wasn't it, but I did it anyway. I think that's that part of us that's our soul saying yes or no. And there's, so for me, I can feel the heart kind of open when it's aligned and contract a little bit. And also the abdomen, if it's not in alignment. And then I'll check it, like, is that would this experience be good for me, and just pushing my edge a little bit? Is it maybe just not wanting to go out of my own comfort zone? So I'll check it that way too, to make sure it's, it's not something that my human self is saying, no, I don't want to do that. If it's meant, if it would be good to pursue. So there's a little nuance in that part of it sometimes, but I think if you really tune into the heart and the gut, they'll usually guide you, as long as you make sure you feel through, am I just preventing myself from an experience that would actually be good for me? So it's a little bit nuanced, but I really think the body will speak to you.
Yeah, so beautiful. And Nancy in the chat says, hold everything as neutral, then nothing is good or bad. And I think it's great advice, Nancy. I think it's important that we learn how to come from a place of neutrality. And I think that there are times where it can help us. Sometimes we're meant to go through an experience. We're meant, if you want to say, to fail a test, because it's in that falling that we learn so much from the getting back up again. And there is a technique that I would love to just share briefly that I learned from Kabbalah called proactive confrontation, or what I like to call soul talking. And this is not just talking to our internal soul, it's actually talking to the external souls all around us. So when I've been saying throughout the show, Lion is feeling this or Chris is saying that, I'm actually listening kind of at a soul level, because we can all hear not only our souls, but the souls of those around us. And so the Kabbalists teach this technique. Let's say that you have a meeting, or it could be with your kids, but let's just say a meeting. Let's say tomorrow you have a meeting at 9 a.m. and it's with your boss about this cantankerous colleague that you've had. And so what you could do is you could check in, and you could see and imagine reaching out from your heart, your soul, whatever you want to envision, to the other person's heart or soul, and telling your boss, hey, Jim, is that still a good time? Are you open to be able to have this conversation tomorrow? And just see if you feel any resistance. In the same way Wendy was just talking about, our body always tells us what we need to know. You might get some pushback, and you might go, oh gosh, I'm getting some sense maybe Jim's having a tough week or whatever it might be going on, that you might want to pause and wait for better timing. And you can do this in person. You don't have to be in the same room with the person. You could do it being thousands of miles away. And I have found time and time again, when we pause and we just ask, is this other person's soul available to have this conversation, available to receive what I'm about to say right now? Whether it's ego or soul, I think it can cause less pain to us and the people around us if we learn to pause and just see if there's spaciousness to be able to have that conversation. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay, great. So let's see, so many new messages coming in here. Karista, I want to throw it back to you for a moment. So we've been talking a lot about the soul and about relationships. I know one of your expertise, in addition, for those people who just joined us, we've had several new viewers just come on with us right now. So thank you to everybody who just came into the room. We have Karista here, Dr. Karista Luminary, and she is an expert on both pre-birth experiences of souls, as well as interpersonal relationships romantically as we evolve and get older. So Karista, can you give us some more feedback perhaps on how we can heal, I guess is the word I want to use. I was saying if there was a different word, heal our relationships with the other people in our life who we're intimately involved with.
Well, just deciding which angle should I take here. I have really come to honor the perception of understanding that most people are confused about what love is and what love isn't. My relationship body of work is called Confused About Love, Get Clear, Be Wise, Feel Secure. And so most of us miss the building blocks of what healthy, what I call secure love really looks and feels like, which from a neuroscience of relationship point of view is basically a lot of mention here of the amygdala feeling, which is the part of the brain when we feel threatened, when we feel insecure, we go into fight or flight. So I've really come back to the basics of wanting to inspire couples as well as parents and children, family dynamics, to really be committed to care about how we impact each other, particularly when our behavior is threatening. and it causes one or both parties feeling threatened. Because in this question of, healing each other, when we are in relationship with people, we're either healing each other or we're hurting each other. Now, that doesn't mean that in the best of secure attachment relationships, we're not fighting. We just need to know how to fight well. It doesn't mean we're in a perfect state of bliss and we're not triggering each other. It's really when we trigger each other and we watch our partner, our child, our siblings, our parents go into significant distress, are we going to stop and say, this is not healthy love happening here right now? Or if we're hitting a trigger and it's not personal to us, how can we help this person really feel less threatened and understand what's going on underneath? So this notion of we're either healing each other or hurting each other becomes a very simple lens to focus on, even if we didn't mean it and we've hurt someone or we've caused significant distress or feeling threatened, even if it's their projections, are we going to care about our impact and help repair that, which might mean to help them do some inner work that has nothing to do with us, but certainly not inflame the feeling of distress. Because why? When we're hijacked in distress, when we're in fight or flight, which is where we go when we feel insecure, anxious is more the fighter position, insecure avoidant is more the withdrawing position, and then we have trauma bonding, which is more the freeze and fold. We can't stay in a state of open mind and open heart to each other. And if our hearts are closed or our minds are closed because we're feeling defensive, then love can't flow and healing can't happen, because healing is an open state of connection to, feeling safe and secure. So that's a simplistic reflection of a complex dynamic of what healing is.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. Anybody, if you have any questions, we have a few more minutes here that we're going to be talking to our incredible panelists. In case you just joined, that was Dr. Krista Luminary, who has a Leadership Institute. We also have Goodman on from Clear Your Beliefs Institute, who does incredible work with that, and Wendy Elwell, who has been here with us, who does incredible work with inner child work, healing past lives, healing in this life, timeline therapy, Kundalini yoga, Reiki master, and so much more. So we definitely invite your questions. We're trying to track them all here across all of these different platforms that we're on. And let's see here. Okay, I don't think we have any other fresh questions yet. So Lion, I'd like to turn it over to you for a moment. What is a piece of wisdom or something that maybe we haven't asked you yet that you feel like is important for people to reflect upon as we're kind of getting closer to the end here? What are your thoughts, Lion?
Life flows. Life wants to flow. Nature wants to flow. And if we're not in flow, there's something blocking the flow. So what I've found to be the most core issue in flow blocking are the limiting and negative beliefs that we carry about ourselves, about other people, and about the world. So at the end of my talks, I often say, if you don't like what's happening in your relationship, examine your beliefs and change them. If you don't like what's happening in your job or your work, examine your beliefs and change them. If you don't like what's happening in your spiritual life, examine your beliefs and change them. So I find that that's the greatest leverage to clear out the blocks. It's like in the chakras, a chakra can be overly expansive or blocked. And the place that we need to bring that flow is into balance. So whenever we're imbalanced psychologically, energetically, emotionally, intellectually, clearing the blocks for whatever's missing enables the flow to come back, to be in balance, and to live from that place of flowing balance. It's not a static balance like a teeter-totter. It's more like a teeter board where there's a cylinder and you're kind of going this way and this way and this way. And it's like, oh, I need a little bit more ego right now because I'm kind of too spacey, or I need a little bit more spirituality because I'm too grounded and not open enough. I need a little bit of psychological development because I'm caught up in reactions. I need a little bit more meditation because I need to be more calm and open. So we are all in this dynamic balance. And we have to find the tools that work for us to bring us back into the flowing balance. And there's lots of tools out there. Jennifer, you've shared 10 of them already today. And each of us bring our different tools, but all with the same purpose, which is to get us aligned with our virtues, with our soul, to clear our behavior patterns that are in the way. And so there's plenty of work to do. And there's plenty of tools. So just do the work. Pick up a tool and use it for a while, see if it works for you. And if it doesn't, change tools and find what works for you. Everybody is unique. We're all the same kind of soul, but we each have this unique multidimensional personality and beingness. So you got to find what works for you. And if you keep doing something and it's not working, change your tool.
Yes, I love that. Speaking of tools, Lion, it's so funny. You just made me think of it. I'm going to put in the chat if anybody wants it. A couple of years ago, I wrote a book called 101 Spiritual Tools for Uncertain Times During COVID. And if you just click on the blog link there, I included all the resources from the book, which is meditations, where you can find videos on inner child work. It's all free. Just click on the blog section and you can go through and find quite a few tools in there. So there are lots of tools that are available. And I saw Mary Beth had a question. Scott, I'm not sure if you can see, she had her hand up, and I certainly want to honor her question and get to it if she still had it. Do we see if Mary Beth is still with us and still has her question?
Okay.
If you do, Mary Beth, you can either put a note in the chat or raise your hand again. And certainly we're getting closer to the end here. So if anybody else has any questions, we invite you to either put your question in the chat, raise your hand again tonight, and all of this is designed for you. So while we're looking into that, Scott, I'm going to turn it over to Wendy for a moment. Wendy, do you have any closing thoughts or wisdom or things that maybe we didn't get to ask you that you really want to emphasize for everyone?
I would say that when you're self-aware, similar to what Lion was saying, examine your beliefs. What really happens, and I love when I work with couples, especially, and this shows up, or family dynamics, or even one-to-one, because at the beginning of the process, I will say what you'll start to notice the more and more self-aware you become of your triggers, your beliefs, your, how you really feel. What starts to happen is you can't not see it everywhere you look. Like once you really embody that, you can see people's patterns. You're not even meaning to. It just is very obvious the more self-aware you are. So I love it when clients will say to me, it's exactly like you said would happen. And I wasn't even aware of my own pattern. So I could not really imagine that I would get to this place where I could, see everybody else's so clearly. And the gift of that is kind of what Karista was saying earlier, like, why would you want to contribute to triggering those things or causing more harm? Like if you can be that aware of, oh, this is a wound, or this is a button, or this is really a pain point for someone, instead offer something other than that, like offer the healing instead of that. And that really is a beautiful byproduct of really doing your own work and examining, what's going on for me. And it starts to become really beautiful. Every interaction you have, you just want to expand that gift of healing, not the harm. So the more and more self-aware you become, the more you contribute to that beautiful ripple of just really being present with other people and helping them see themselves more clearly.
Because we are getting close to the end, I want to start showing people how to find our wonderful presenters. And again,
Scott, would you mind, just in case anybody has a recommendation while you do this in the chat, we did have the question from Mary Beth that got put in here. Can somebody suggest the best modalities for healing in utero trauma? So if people just want to put it in the chat, if Karista, Lion, or Wendy have anything, that would be great. And then meanwhile, we can go do that. Thank you, Scott.
yeah, absolutely. And actually, I saw that Lion had responded to her, so we're good. And I want people to know all about Om Heals and how you can find, in this case, Wendy. In a moment, we'll also you can find Lion there. And these are two of the amazing 80 practitioners that Jennifer has found from all over the world. And so if you just go to om-heals.com, here's where you find Wendy. Or if you go to view all practitioners, This is where you can see so many. We had Aaron on our show last week. He was wonderful. And look at all these amazing beings from all over the world that are available through omheals.com. It's a beautiful, beautiful thing that you've created. And just a little bit back to Wendy for a moment. You can find her on Om Heals, or you can find her on Facebook. And most of you are watching us on Facebook. There she is with two beautiful horses. So it's Wendy Elwell, Elwell, and that's where you'll find her on Facebook. And it's actually wendy.elwell.7, wendy.elwell.7, if you want to find her on Facebook. And Wendy, thank you so much. What's the story on the horses? My mother used to raise Morgans. So.
Oh, I am getting trained in equine therapy, which is, the horses will show you whatever you most need without any words, without anything. They'll just reflect it to you and literally help you energetically move it. Very powerful.
Wow,
Love it.
it is powerful work. I'd love to do I'd love to do a whole show about that sometime, about animal therapy. That would be very powerful.
Yes. Thank you so much for having me here. Really, and beautiful to be with everybody. Thank you so much.
Beautiful.
Thank you,
conversation.
Wendy.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you, Jennifer.
Go ahead, Jennifer.
Oh, I was just saying thank you. It's back to you, Scott. I was just thanking Wendy for her
Okay.
time.
All right, well then let's bring up Lion. And Lion, it's great to see you again. We've known each other a long time. And Lion also can be found on Om Heals. So we're going to go there for a moment. And I want to acknowledge that the work you do is so powerful. As a coach, as the person who runs Love Coach Academy, doing parts therapy, trauma-informed therapy is so incredibly valuable. And really, everyone should do it. Everyone should really take the time to work with somebody like any of the three people we've met tonight and do this powerful work. I also want to go to your regular website, which I have right here pulled up. There you are. And it's easy to find his website because it's his name. So it's liongoodman.com. liongoodman.com. And we'll start by going to his home. And Lion, you've got a lot going on. Tell us a little bit about who you most enjoy working with. Is there a particular demographic group that's especially important to you?
As Jennifer said, I'm a teacher of teachers and a coach of coaches. So the people I do a very large training, 100-hour, 20-week training accredited by the International Coaching Federation and the Association for Coaching, called the Clear Beliefs Coach Training. And so we train healers, coaches, therapists in this methodology called the Clear Beliefs Method of trauma-informed therapeutic coaching. And it's quite amazing. People come out of the training transformed themselves because they practice with the tools during the training and also with the tools for transforming others. So that's my favorite thing to do. And I also do a healing form of coaching for individuals. And I work mostly with professionals, everyone from executives to coaches to healers to therapists. So I'm pretty eclectic. And
Wow.
for people who want to clear their own beliefs, we have this Clear Your Beliefs coaching program. And that's for people who want to just get their own beliefs cleared out of the way. We have a number of trained coaches who facilitate that. And it's an 8-week program that people can go dive into and clear the major blocks out of their way.
Wow. Powerful work that you're doing. And, since your wife, who's also a brilliant therapist, I can only imagine the conversations the two of you have.
Oh, you can't imagine.
Geeking out on all this stuff. Yeah. Well,
if you want to learn about relationships, Karista is the great teacher, and boy, has she taught me a thing or two or five.
So before we go to Karista, what is something that as her husband and as who knows her, what does make her especially unique or especially powerful in her work? This is your chance to go public with a testimonial for your wife. So I'm setting you up here, pal.
All right. Well, thank you. I'll do my best. Later, I'll find out whether I did good or not. So I have seen Karista take people who were like breaking apart and getting a divorce. And 2 months later, they are in love and they have the best relationship of their lives. I mean, she is an incredible multidimensional healer of relationships. And I think her that's her most admirable quality. There's lots of others that are incredible, but that is her genius. And so if you want to learn a thing or two about relationships or heal your relationship with someone, she's the one to go to.
Beautiful. I think you did good. I think you did good.
Okay.
Well, the way for people to find out and to schedule is to go to her website, which is trueself.net. .net. Trueself.net. And what's be your true self really mean to you, Karista? I see that, that's kind of your focus. Tell us a little bit about the true self map that you do.
Okay, it's actually one of my focuses. Relationship counseling at the confusedaboutLove.com is also one of my great passions and a lot of my clientele. And that really means that I'm really encouraging couples, parents and children, anyone relating with each other, that there is a true self to be drawing out in each other beyond the reactive conditioned self. Is this nature made up of our virtues, of our higher consciousness, and our benevolent virtues, really. The true self is a blend. To your point, Scott, I agree with you that the ego is a critical part. I mean, the ego is made up of each lifetime, whether you believe in a lifetime or not. It's made up of the physical, emotional, and mental bodies. And so this is the instrument for the soul to actually, the consciousness of the soul, which is not dependent on the physicality of the human experience to actually exist. It exists on a plane of consciousness. It is in my particular map, as you refer to, from the traditions I've studied, which I did write a dissertation on reincarnation and karma. So I have, confidence in my own map for myself, that there is a higher consciousness. There are planes of consciousness. So even the emotional body, if you see the emotional body is made up of planes of consciousness, hate, rage, high, destructive, fiery emotions are lower emotions in terms of awareness and consciousness to love, peace, and joy. So really my work, I will hone in on wherever the woundology is, wherever the trauma is. You don't have to believe in past lives. It's usually found in the attachment dynamic to oneself. How securely are you attached to your own self? How securely are you relating, functioning with someone else, where your behavior comes from your more virtuous nature, and where you have that reactivity. We've all been saying it in our different ways, beliefs, inner child, that that's where you hone in, where you're hijacked, so that when the human ego, which we love so much because it's such an essential part of our experience, is cared for in honor to be healed, then the more higher, more refined, virtuous, perceptive nature of our higher mind can actually shine through.
Beautiful. I'm going to bring your husband back on because I also want to point out that you guys have the Luminary Leadership Institute that you do together. So there you are.
Look how young we look.
I know, you look gorgeous.
That was 10 years ago.
So tell us about this. What's this project that you two are up to?
Well, it was inspired by, again, working, both of us have a lot of high achieving clients, and realizing that many of them, particularly ourselves as well, I'm almost 67, lines up there, 69, people who actually are looking for their higher purpose. Usually, if they haven't achieved it in their 40s, by their 50s, there's a sense of, I need to leave some legacy. I need to be really honed in. And so this was a line I came together, and we combined all of our psychological understanding and spiritual understanding, and created a very specific 9 assessment process for people to clear out their conditioning, their relationship to their family of origin, their emotional EQ, where they have weaknesses and strengths, their beliefs, line specialty, extra specialty, their virtues, their relationship dynamics, to clear, in a sense, what we call a butterfly effect, where our conditioned self is like the caterpillar, and then we go into this cocoon of self-awakening, which our program really hones in and speeds up that clearing of the inner self, and the old self, the caterpillar, becomes the butterfly, the new, more true self nature. And we do that primarily with high achievers in the Luminary leadership program. But leadership can be anything. You can be the head of a household, or you can be, doing anything in life where you lead as your true self.
Beautiful.
And my first career, sorry, Krista, my first career was in headhunting. So I spent 25 years working with executives and
Yeah.
finding people for jobs and jobs for people. And so that was brought in. It's like that kind of work where executives are particular kinds of people. And so the Luminary Leadership Institute was really formed particularly for those kinds of high achievers who will take the bull by the horns and really go for a big evolutionary process.
In a short period of time. I mean, and to train the ego, the ambitious ego that many of us were driven by, and realize the luminary is the pure consciousness of the soul nature, training the ego to express that, because that is where one has access to what Lion has referred to as, the true purpose or the soul purpose, which is different than the egoic purpose sometimes for people. And they often want to really hone in on that later in life if they haven't discovered it. And the soul purpose can change. Like, I've had 7 generations of my soul purpose through different modalities, the parenting, the couples, the leadership. So you don't always have one soul purpose, but usually there's a common thread. And mine happens to be to embody the soul, which I started at 21, and it has many aspects. So everyone has multiple soul purposes, or they have one that they stay with their whole life, that they've come here to master.
Beautiful. Well,
Well,
actually, go ahead.
oh,
Jenny.
go right ahead, Scott. It's all you.
Well, I wanted to offer just one last thought. I personally do believe in past lives. I've had a lot of experiences that have indicated to me pretty strongly. But something that a teacher of mine taught was not to get hung up on any dogma, even the dogma of our own belief about past lives. And so I'll use an example from my own as a way of looking at it. I've always loved to feed people. I love to feed people. I always want to pick up the check when I go out to the restaurant. I always want to make sure that everybody is eating. And and I've been like that for 40 years. And I did a past life recall maybe 10 years ago. And I saw myself as a Native American chief of a small tribe. And as I was leading my tribe west, we hit a really rough spot, and some of my people died of starvation. Now, whether or not that's historically true doesn't matter. It shows that in my archetypal landscape, that story, whether it's a true past life experience or an archetypal example, is helping to inform me. And then it becomes chicken or the egg. Do I want to feed people because I have that? Or do I have that because I want to feed people? And it's like that with anything, not to get too hung up on any archetypal belief, any spiritual belief, any metaphysical spiritual experience, but any experience we have, it doesn't matter what it means in the outside world or if it's historically accurate. All that matters is what's it telling us about who we are in present time and our relationship to ourself in present time. So I'm seeing nodding heads, so I'm imagining there's a general consensus there.
Well, that's well said, Scott. And another factor is that we live in a timeline, but souls don't. Souls are outside of the 3D timeline. And so we think of soul evolution as I'm in this life, and then I'm in this life, and then I'm in this life, and then I'm in this life. But to the soul, they're all happening at once.
Right.
And they can incarnate in many different bodies at the same time in the same places or different places on Earth. So the idea that we only have one soul and we're one person at a time, that's really a very human concept. And once we blow that one away, then everything is possible.
Yeah. Thank you for pointing that out. It's beyond what our brains can really comprehend, the multidimensional self. And probably most of us, whether it was through psychedelics or meditation or near-death experiences, have experienced that multidimensional self. And it's a blessing when we do. And again, important not to try and figure it all out because it's beyond our comprehension. Well, thank you, everybody. I'm going to turn it over to Jennifer for any closing thoughts. This is the first of 3 conversations we're having this weekend on the Awakening World. Tomorrow night, we've got amazing people, Sunday, amazing people. And Jennifer, I'm turning it over to you to close us out.
Well, thank you so much, Scott. It's been such a delight and a pleasure to be here with everyone. And it's funny, on your last note, Scott, I was looking through some text, and Deepak had sent me an article a couple weeks ago that he wrote called On Bewilderment. And this idea, as you and Lion were just speaking about, that there's all these senses of false certainties. We think something is some way, and yet, if we actually tried to wrap our heads around the vastness of the universe and all of these multiple versions of our souls simultaneously existing, it would just be enough to blow our minds. And so Deepak writes in the article, which I've shared with several people, about this idea of bewilderment. What if we could connect to just being bewildered in a sense of awe and wonder, so that no matter what potential obstacle or opportunity that we're faced with at the soul level, at the human level, that we played with it, we danced with it, and we allowed ourselves to be awestruck and bewildered by it. How might that transform our perspectives? And there is no right or wrong way to be a human being, to connect to your soul, whether you're an old soul, a young soul, it's your 100th incarnation or your first. Know that you're divinely exactly where you're supposed to be. And as some theorists say, we are constantly popping in and out of different timelines based on the thoughts we think, the words we speak, the actions we take. And when you begin to play with that, you realize, though, whether or not any of this is true, capital T true, that we do technically have the ability to, using the reins of our consciousness and our words and our thoughts and actions, as everybody so gracefully and eloquently shared this evening, to direct ourselves to the life that we choose to live in this lifetime. And eventually, as each one of us, like little popcorn, how you throw one little popcorn kernel and it pops, and then you throw more and then they all start to pop. Eventually, that's us as humanity. And as each one of us awakens, we are getting closer and closer to living in a reality where we might be able to all have bliss, happiness, and joy. And yet sometimes we do need the contrast and that juxtaposition of the darkness to see the light. And I truly feel that that is what is happening right now. And I'll leave you with a final little story from the Kabbalist. In Kabbalah, they like to say that if you imagine that you have these scales of life, and that every act of kindness that we do is a sesame seed for good, of every word we think, every kind thought we have, every action we take, pop, we're dropping a little sesame seed onto the side of uplifting and good for the greater whole. And then perhaps every time that we're judgmental of ourselves or another, that's another sesame seed that we just dropped it on the side for negativity or darkness, not good or bad. What if, though, we're playing a game that enough of us are sharing from our higher selves, from our souls, listening to our souls, that we have so many actions of kindness and loving compassion towards one another, that the scales of good fall over, and then everything else, all that stuff, the shadow stuff that we've been dealing with, also integrates back to the whole, back to the original light and that oneness. And that's exactly what we're going to be exploring in tomorrow night's show. We have famous author Jude Curvin, who's a dear new friend of mine, who I've been collaborating with on the Unitive Narrative, which you'll hear about. Adam Hall, Julie Kroll, actually her company Good of the Whole, how apropos is that? Teresa Collins, our dear friend from the Global Coherence Pulse. We do encourage you to go to the globalcoherencepulse.org and join us for the Pulse tomorrow as well at 12 p.m. Pacific. It's the third Saturday of every month and is also free to register and attend. And then we have Ashley Lee, who will be joining us, Jamisha, wonderful musical artist, my dear friend, Dr. Mama Ivy, and of course, Shakti Durga, who joined us back in February. And this is all going to be, what is our soul? Today, we focused on our individual soul. And tomorrow, we're going to focus a lot more on our collective soul, Gaia's soul, our soul, and coming from a unitive perspective. What if we all evolved to collaborate and cooperate rather than compete? So I'll leave you with that thought this evening. And Scott, my friend, it's been an honor. Lion, Carista, what a pleasure to meet you. Wendy, you're my soul sister. Can't wait to spend some time with horses together with you. And I'm so grateful for everybody who joined us today. Nancy, Mary Beth, Connie, all of your wonderful questions and wisdom that you all shared in the chat throughout this. You really made the show special by your participation. So much love and deep gratitude to everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, baby.
Thank you, Scott. Thank you, Jennifer.
Scott and
Thank you,
Jennifer.
Kristen. Thank you, Wendy.
Thank
I'm
you.
going to
thanks,
gallery
Maggie.
view, so turn on your cameras, people. Turn on your cameras. Say goodbye. And
Maggie, it's great to have you here. Maggie's another great practitioner. So much love, everyone.
Hello.
Night, everyone.
cameras are turning on. We'll see you all tomorrow night, everybody. Thank you again.
Thank
Wonderful
you.
Much
guest.
love.